welcome to Talks at Google. I'm Juliet Ehimuanshiazo, and I feel very honored and really delighted to be moderating this panel of very inspiring women. I'm going to start by introducing them very briefly. A lot of you are very familiar with who they are. So I'll start to my immediate left. We have Mrs. Ibuko Awoshika. She's the first female chairman, board of directors, First Bank of Nigeria Limited. She's also the founder and CEO. Woohoo! Woohoo! We're very proud. She's also the founder and CEO of the Chair Center Group. She's a multiple award-winning entrepreneur and the first Nigerian recipient of the prestigious International Women Entrepreneurial Challenge Award. She currently sits on many boards and is a co-founder and past chairperson of Women in Business, Management and Public Service, WIMBIS. Ibuko, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And we have T.Y. Bello. She is a multifaceted woman with a few labels. Singer, songwriter, photographer, and philanthropist. Prior to pursuing a solo career, she was a member of the defunct gospel band Kush. She's also a member of the Nigerian photography collective, Depth of Field, and was the official photographer of the former president of Nigeria. She's best known for her award-winning singles, Greenland, Ekundayo, This Man, Freedom, Fumi's, Fun Mice, and the Morning Songbook. She stages an annual photography exhibition to raise funds for orphans across the country. She's also a director of Link a Child, an NGO dedicated to propagating information on orphanages in Nigeria and soliciting sponsorship on their behalf. It's great to have you here, T.Y.
Thank you.
So to start the conversation, this will be in two parts. We're kicking off with this panel, and we'll have a second session after the break with Dr. Obi Ezekwesili. So to start off, I'm going to ask a relatively broad question for each member of the panel, starting with Mrs. Awoshika. So when we think about where we are in our society today, we're talking about smashing the glass ceiling. Is there still a glass ceiling? We have made some progress. In your opinion, is there still a glass ceiling? And what has been your experience around taking decisions to help you smash or overcome the glass ceiling?
Okay, this is glass ceiling that won't go away. I actually think that the issue of the glass ceiling is different for every woman. Mm-hmm. And is also different depending on where you are in your career or your business life. It's different in Nigeria, putting it in context, it's different depending on what part of the country you come from as well, because there are different levels that women have at in terms of having opportunities, depending on what part of the country you come from. But I think that collectively, when we look at it, no matter what part of the country you come from, we have moved quite a distance in terms of the kind of opportunities that women have. But that's also a function of social class, because that's another thing. The average middle class to upper class family doesn't segregate between who goes to school, whether it's the male or the female child. And the South, especially the southwestern part of Nigeria, would have every child from middle class to upper class averagely have a university education, and at least attempt to build a career one way or the other. Now, there are other factors that then begin to come to play, because I think at the starting point, male and female start off basically equal footing.
Level playing field.
Yes. But along the path, other factors that are not even as traditional as we think begin to show up. So now you've married a guy who has his own insecurities, and because of his insecurities, he would like a woman that he can keep at home and control. So that's not a societal factor, that's an individual issue. Or you've married a a man who just doesn't, in his mind, his mother he's a housewife, and he grew up with his mother always being there, and what he wants is a wife who is a housewife. I think the real issue is about what the women want to do in terms of whatever kind of ceiling is still there. It's an individual choice for every woman to choose what life you want to live. And that comes into play. We can play back to our girl child and start to teach the girls about having the ability to make that choice for themselves. And that should start from deciding how far they want to go by having a sense of who they are. And at a stage, deciding who they want to marry based on who they want to be. And choosing the spouse is a key success factor in my books. So if you have a sense of who you are, you have a sense of how far you want to go, when a nice-looking, rich and handsome guy who wants a housewife comes calling, you don't even listen because he doesn't fit where you want to go. So it's not a matter of that he wants to marry you, it's a matter of, do you want to marry him? Does he fit into the life you want to live? Does he fit into the future you see for yourself? Now, so as we take some of the fundamental issues and we move forward, we then get into the workplace. You get into the workplace and then you talk about, does the woman understand that she can't play the feminine card anymore if she really wants to respect in the workplace? Does she know that she's got to earn her place by making sure she's competent, she's capable, she's equipped, and she's ready to play? Does she understand she must have courage, she must be focused, she must be able to challenge status quo and fight for herself as well? Does she know she mustn't defer to the male just because he's male? As long as they're pairs and they have equal opportunity, she should fight for the position. So there are many things that come into play, because at the end of the day, one thing I can say in my experience is that when you're good at what you do, there's a stage where you can't be ignored, whether you're male or female.
That's true.
There is a point where the competition falls apart, the gender card falls apart, because at the end of the day, what is the interest of the shareholder or the stakeholders? They want to succeed at whatever they want to do. And when you're facing the bare facts, you're looking for the best person for the job. Now, there's all the issue of, okay, boys club, girls club. Okay, so boys can network, girls can network too. I actually think girls can be more powerful networkers. Why? You can use the network of your spouse, and you can use your own network. And when you use your network, you use the network of your friends and their spouses. So you can play from both sides, even more than the guy can. But your strongest weapon is really about showing up. Because the one thing nobody can ignore is when you show up. When you show up at your table and your capacity, your capability, your competence, your ability is so open for everybody to see, you can't be ignored. And that narrows the table. And there's a point where the game, I know there's still a mindset issue that we're dealing with, but like I said, the factors vary depending on different circumstances. But first, let's deal with us. So I think when the girls have said, okay, you know what, we're ready to go the whole lot. We're not making excuses. Oh, so I'm a girl. Okay, so I have children. So I have a husband. We work out how to deal with those. And I think a lot of girls can deal with that now. We find the solutions. We're not super women. So we receive help. We create help. So there's a cook to cook. What's my responsibility? There must be food on the table for my family. Who cares who cooks the food? As long as there's food there. So my children must be taken care of. If I can afford to take 20 people to take care of them, then I make it work. Somebody must do my shopping. You don't have to know. I can call Saudat and get everything delivered into my kitchen. There's a lot more ways to get things done now, so that the typical traditional limitations that women have can be removed. And technology makes it easy, because then you're in the middle of a meeting, I can still check on my son in university in England. Just WhatsApp, send him a message, he responds. I'm going on. I've checked in for the day, and I'm still sitting at a meeting. So it's, I think we can change. We can definitely move forward.
Great.
Thank you.
You raised some pretty important points, and I would like to stay on those for a bit. You talked about some factors. For example, choice of spouse, right? And a lot of women actually do value having, you know, a balanced home and a peaceful home, and that's very important. And TY, very recently, you've been very much in the press, being instrumental in transforming the life of a bread seller to become a model.
Okay, I'm glad we're talking about this the glass ceiling, and women making it forward and pushing forward in society. My take on it is, you don't necessarily have to be antagonistic to break it. It can be done with wisdom, and it's all about maneuvering. I would rather carry a man along than drag him over kicking and screaming or going at it alone. I think psychologically it's better for most women when they have the cooperation of whoever they are with. Now, she said something very important, and that is the point where most people are not being mentored or taught enough. It's making that initial choice to find out who you should be with in the first place. For instance, I knew I wanted to be an artist, and I had an ex-boyfriend who said, I don't mind this photography thing, but I don't kind of see my wife carrying cameras around. And I took it seriously. I did not think it was just something on the side. I wasn't going to marry him and hope that he would support me afterwards. So I knew, for instance, that for this lady, the only way we could go far was if we had cooperation, because you have to realize that culture is a very, very big part of our, you know, of the whole scenario here, and you can't do away with it. You can't fight it necessarily. You can't fight. You can't change, but with wisdom.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Ibukun, what's your take on that?
Well, to be honest, I think half the battle that women fight here is because we tend to live out of context. You know, we're all well educated, quite exposed. We've been everywhere, and we've read Mills and Boone. We've watched a lot of movies, and a lot of girls then get up and really just want to declare the kind of liberty that they think that a Western woman has. The reality is, it's an approach that is bound to fail from the onset. I always talk about strategy. There's no business without a strategic plan. And we're all comfortable to have a strategic plan for the next 3 years of our business, 5 years of our business. Why don't we have a strategic plan for our life that affects where we really want to go? And when you're drawing up a strategic plan for your business, you don't leave the context of your environment out of it. You take all the factors around you into consideration in making the decisions of how you work around it to achieve success. That's really how we as an African woman, and specifically as a Nigerian, need to look at it. Reality is, culture is on a transformational journey.
Yes.
Society doesn't change overnight. And even if it does, I don't know, it would probably take 1,000,000 years for many things in Nigeria to be totally done. As you can see, our parents go to school abroad, get to the highest level, and just as they retire, they decide they want to go and live in their village. And you really can't understand how. The guy's left his village since he was God knows what. But it shows you that that is quite deep, this cultural thing.
Yeah.
Now, what that should say to us as women is, this is my context. This is my environment. There's certain values that are important in my environment. I want to play to win. That's my goal. How do I play to win in my environment? What does it cost me to seek my husband's permission for something I want to do? Not because I don't know what I want to do, but it's wisdom, because I'd rather run with his backing, and if I fail, I have someone whose shoulder I can lean on, than someone to say, I told you so. You know, it doesn't. I'll give you an example. A young woman got transferred. She works for a multinational, and she always knew that she will be up for her career to go really far in that multinational. She'll be up for international posting at any point in time. Now, if I'm in that kind of setting, and then you're married, and you can see the opportunity coming, and you're being positioned for it, first and foremost, because I know my job can have that context, I will prepare my husband one way or the other. It would be a conversation that we would have had that. even if you're pretending sometimes like, hey, they could just transfer me to Mexico tomorrow. How am I going to go to Mexico, you, the children, and all of that? You're instigating a conversation, but you're preparing the ground. So you would hear his opinion, and listening to him will help you to know how to formulate the strategy to work the environment of the home in case that situation arises, so that his mind is already conditioned. And he might end up thinking he's the one that's convinced you to take the posting because he thinks it's good for the job, but you already know you want to go to Mexico. So it's not how. So I'm saying he gets the respect, he gets the honor. A man has a natural big ego. What are you going to do about that? The bottom line is, how do you manage his ego, manage his respect, and his authority as the head of the house in a way that you still achieve your goal?
From the perspective of entrepreneurship, you've been quite the entrepreneur. And I know you talk about really focusing on ethics and integrity in building the Chair Center Group. And you had some challenging situations which you were able to turn around for the good of the business in the long run. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs going through challenges from the perspective of navigating through, standing for what you believe in, holding your grounds, and actually being successful?
Okay, I think the starting point is that you have to have a conversation with yourself at the very beginning and decide who you are or who you want to be. You must decide what your value system will be. You can never wait to get to a crossroad before you determine what your value system is. The reality is, if you try to decide your value system at a crossroad, the pressure of the moment will force you in a different direction. So the thing, what happened to me was, as I was starting out as a young girl in my 20s, I became a Christian because I did start off as a Muslim. I was brought up in a Muslim home. I became a Christian, and then I read this book about, it was written by some guy about God owning his business. And I found it very fascinating. And I made a decision that I wanted God to own my business. And God can't own a business where the value system isn't based on the Bible. So I built my own value system on biblical principles. And with that conviction, I decided some things I will not do. Before I became a Christian, I started my business for about a year. But even at the beginning of the business, without the biblical principles, based on just my upbringing, I decided two things I will never do. I was never going to sleep with a man to get a job, and I was never going to pay a bribe. Now, everybody told me they were perfect formula to fail, especially the bribe in Nigerian context. But, I think we underestimate Nigerians. That's the one thing I can tell you, because if I've built a business, this is our 28th year, and I say that we've lived by those principles, then obviously there's more than enough room in this environment to build the kind of business that you want. It's all about you. And with those two things said before me, I started the journey. Now, of course, there have been many, many moments where those values have been challenged, but I've been sometimes really difficult and very sad moments. I've taken the decision to stand by those principles, paying a high price many instances. But one thing I've learned is this: if you want to build something to last, you need to build on the right values. If you build on compromise, the same compromises will destroy you. I mean, imagine a girl who is willing to sleep with men to get the contract. You're only attractive before you're conquered. The reality is, once the man slept with you once, your value is depreciated by 180% or 90%. I mean, he can have a repeat performance, but he's overcome the challenge. So there's no big deal. So he doesn't have to give you the big contract anymore. He can give that to the next new conquest that he wants, and you can get the peanuts. If you pay a bribe, there's always somebody who is willing to pay more than you. And after a while, it's a tough game. I then decided what I would rather invest in is to invest time to build service and build quality product and make my company indispensable to any customer that engages with us over time. And yes, you might be slower than your peers at a stage because there's some things you're not willing to do, but I've found in my business that you're far more sustainable over time. And at crucial moments, those principles were tested, because like in 2004, when the government said, okay, ban on everything related to furniture, it was a function of, okay, I'd been in business for 15 years then. Was I now going to become a smuggler? I wasn't going to become it, because my principal value system had determined in advance was not going to support that. So the only option I had was to do backward integration and invest in factories to support. What we were doing was producing, we started local production originally, and then all the factors in Nigeria didn't allow us to fulfill the dream I wanted. So we started producing in OEM factories around the world and bringing the components back and adding to create our own line. So when the game changed, all we did was, okay, so what are we allowed to bring in? What are we not allowed to bring in? And we started working back and started having JVs to produce in Nigeria. Ultimately, staying by our principles encouraged us to build the necessary factories here. Now, I'll now tell you the real offshoot. When people talk about, oh, I sit on this board, I sit on that board, I do that now, frankly speaking, the things that actually made me attractive to be invited to sit on a number of boards were those same things that I went through in those tough times. It was the lessons I learned by staying true to my principle. It was the sacrifices I made. Because I remember when I was going to join the board of Cadbury, it was right after Cadbury's crisis. And I got a call the day before from a friend of mine that said, some people would like to come and talk to me. I said, well, I'm traveling tomorrow. If they can see me tomorrow morning, that'll be fine. And 2 British gentlemen came to my house. We had a conversation for like 2.5 hours and all of that. Cadbury was basically trying to set up a board of integrity. And refusing to do those things over time was how I got on their list. You never know who is watching.
Yeah.
You don't know who is watching. Everybody is watching what you're doing. People might hail you even when you're doing the wrong thing. You sound successful and all of that, but when the chips are down, you know, somebody is going to say something because somebody is watching. And that's exactly what happened. They had some list of 30 that was whittled down to 8, that was whittled down to 6, and then they ended up with a list of 3, myself, Atedo Peterside, and Dr. Suleiman, who joined the board. And I've been on the board of Cadbury for since 2009. The day I was invited to have a chat with the group chair of FBN Holding, he was the chair of First Bank PLC then. It was simply for me to be recruited to be chairman of the insurance company because they were having a startup company that is a joint venture with Sanlam of South Africa. And they were looking for someone who had good experience in driving a startup with international partnership. Now, it was the challenge of 2004 that led me to a joint venture partnership with the largest French manufacturer of office seating. So I had that experience. I had stuck to my values through the trial period. And though every knowledge I'd gained within that period was what they needed for what they wanted to do. And that's how I was invited. I actually had a conversation about being the chair of the insurance company, but I didn't know that to even be the chair of the insurance company, I had to get on the board of the bank. So a month after, I just got a message that said, you've been appointed to the board of First Bank. I'm like, board of First Bank? How? I was asked about joining the insurance company. So, you know, things you do for the right reasons, ultimately, people are watching. Somebody will notice, and it would create value. So doing the right thing has its own reward over time. You might bear pain for a season, but there's a time when everything comes together. And I guess I turn down more board invitations than I accept. So basically, there is a high demand right now for people of integrity. And women more than men. And when the chips are down, the whole world right now is pushing about getting more women at the table because there's a gender gap. And once you don't have women at the table, you don't have a 360-degree view of anything. That's just the truth. Because imagine me on the board of Cadbury. They're talking about Bonvita. When I listen to some of what the men say, I just laugh. Because I'm a mother. Who buys stuff for the house? It's the woman. Who gets the children to drink beverage? It's the woman that is involved in that conversation. If you take a decision at a table like that, involving a product like that, you don't have a woman's view, you will miss some points. And that's the kind of thing that happens in any boardroom without women being in place.
Great, thank you. I think we're going to have to take a break now. Thank you very much, Mrs. Awosika. It's been great having you with us. We'll take a break and then we'll carry on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Why don't you have to? Thank you. I've got to run.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm very delighted that we now have Dr. Oby Ezekwesili with us. So I'm just going to start off going through a few words from her profile, and then we can get into the conversation. Once again, the theme for this conversation is smashing the glass ceiling, and this is in honor of International Women's Day. So Dr. Oby Ezekwesili is a senior economic advisor with Africa Economic Development Policy Initiative, where she advises reform-committed African heads of state on economic and policy issues. She is co-founder of the Bring Back Our Girls Citizens movement, advocating for the safe rescue of the abducted 219 schoolgirls of Chibok community in Borno State, northern Nigeria. From 2002 to 2007, Oby worked for the federal government of Nigeria as Minister of Education, Minister of Solid Minerals. She also serves on many boards, locally and internationally, and was named as one of 2015 Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. I think that deserves a round of applause. And 50 most powerful Africans by the New Africa magazine. So once again, Oby, so great to have you here. Thank you for making it all the way from Abuja.
I'm sweating.
Well, can we get you some? Okay.
That was meant to make you feel a little.
Okay.
A little bad. for making me make this trip. It was tough. It was a tough trip, but I'm delighted to be with you. I wish I could have come earlier than exactly when we scheduled, but I couldn't control the airways.
But thank you so much for the commitment.
Yes.
There's been a lot of expectation and excitement about you coming, so it's great that you were able to make it.
Thank you.
So to kick off the conversation, I'll just so we're talking about smashing the glass ceiling, right? And I think it's worth starting out to just ask the question: in your opinion, is there still a glass ceiling? We've come some way, maybe a long way, maybe not enough progress, but we've come some way over the years. Do you feel there's still a glass ceiling? And in your experience, what are some examples of where you had to take specific decisions to smash that glass ceiling?
Wow, that's like many questions in one. Okay, so let me start by saying what a great honor it is for me to be sitting with a wonderful, I think you set the standard for what it means to be a mentor now, isn't it? Yes. To be able to discover talent and to go all the way out to offer opportunity. This is people may have their different angles on this, but when I first saw it, I tweeted at you and I said, this is a brilliant thing that you've done. So please, I join everybody in applauding what you've done. You've not done it for just that young woman. You've basically sent a message to many young women that opportunity just needs some level of diligence. Olajumoke was diligently working hard. She was not doing something else when opportunity met her. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Glass ceiling is anything that may not be, well, that's exactly why it's glass, because sometimes you're not supposed to see it, but it's somewhere there, standing as an obstacle, as a constraint to the progression of a woman in the place of career, occupation, and profession. And so with glass ceiling, there was a time in the history of the world when it was perfectly normal for women to have no aspiration toward any occupation, career, or profession. And so at that time, when the awakening began to permeate through some set of women who dared to challenge that idea that all a woman needed to do was to be a lovely consort of a man and sit around with other women just found themselves and have an afternoon tea. When some women began to challenge that, they needed to be able to carry many more voices along with them. And over time, that conversation began to happen, that what are the barriers to this, to women being able to fulfill their talent? And it went from just that socialization, that social expectation that it wasn't necessary. A man could do the work, take care of everyone. And so why are you wasting your time trying to do what a man can do, So you had that. You also had religious angles to it, where some of the people who didn't completely read their Bible well sort of thought that when God created Adam and Eve, he did say to Eve, take half the brain of Adam. There's nowhere in the scripture that's contained at all. So clearly, God did not have an intention for a woman to be in any way less than a human being. As a matter of fact, I normally say to people that in Genesis 1:26, he actually expressly in that conversation said, male and female created he them. So, and then after that, in 28 of that same Genesis 1, it then says, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, dominate, subdue. Who was he speaking to? He was speaking to both males and females. So if he had an intention for any one of them to be subordinated in terms of their intellectual capacity to be the best that they could be, he would expressly have said it. Even though God does not speak too often, when he speaks, he is very composite in trying to convey his message. So religious is there for the human mind, where they created a barrier. And then there are, certain things that are geographical, where, in certain environments, the topography and the geography of it means that there is an obstacle to women being able to respond to some of the kind of context within which they operate. And of course, economic, family issues, and all of that. All these obstacles and barriers act as glass ceiling. But when you now take it to the micro level, a glass ceiling is whatever exists in terms of the way that human resources is incentivized within the workplace. And if it is incentivized in a particular way, any part of it that hinders the progress of women is a glass ceiling.
Yeah.
So if the incentive in the workplace does not make itself amenable and enabling, that's the word, enabling of women because of some of the variations in the pattern and the lives of women that could require the workplace to adapt. And, with that adaptability, help them to overcome those hidden barriers. Then you have a glass ceiling.
Yeah.
So I've taken from the global to the macro and then to the to the firm level, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So,
and to the personal level.
And to the personal level.
From your own personal experience, because you're quite accomplished, and one can say you're a great example of someone who's been able to break potentially many ceilings along the way.
That's only 3 human beings likes me.
Can you share an example of a situation in your life where you had to take decisions consciously to help you break through?
You see, one of the things that I loved about what Ibuku was saying is she used the word contextual. I don't know in what light she was saying it, but I think I heard that word contextual. Context is so important. And, in policy school, I was taught that without context, you run into trouble. The reason I say this is that there are some women, obviously, who have somehow managed to not see this glass, even when it was I don't know why some of you are laughing. You just don't say the glass. You just you walk through the and before the glass knows you've walked through, it's probably shattered and broken, but you just keep walking. But it's not the same for all of our experiences. So my sense is that I'm trying so hard to say that this was the exact moment that I felt like somebody tried to stop me on my path because I'm a woman in my expression of my calling, in my expression of my talent, and I'm running into a block. And that's probably because another important part of the glass ceiling conversation is actually the glass ceiling that the individual places on themselves. Okay?
Yeah.
So if there is a mental roadblock, that's a glass ceiling.
Yeah.
When a woman sort of says to herself, every time that somebody does something to me, it's because I'm a woman. That's a crush, and it's going to always take you down. There's nowhere else to go, So just being able to have a mindset shift can be very important as part of the way of shattering the glass ceiling. But where I would say that I have come face to face with this matter of, oh, but you're a woman, is actually not the workplace experience. It's the global experience where, culturally, which is part of the glass ceiling that we say in the country a lot, culturally, people sort of make presumptions about how power relationship ought to look like. If they've made assumptions and if they have this presumptuous attitude, then what they're going to think is, why should a woman appear to be strong? So you can have instances where people say, you're so strong. Oh, I wonder who Obi Ezekwesili's husband is. And I'm thinking to myself, if only you knew that I have a husband who, if he just gives me one eye like this, I will just find my seat quietly. Because, so that's my own experience of glass ceiling. It's a macro, level one. It's not the level where, in my profession, in my work, anyone has sort of said to me, you're a woman, so there are limitations that we must place on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I certainly do agree that context varies from one person to another and actually plays a key role in looking at this holistically. And the fact that, the mental block is a very big one to break through. And thinking about that mental block, sometimes, that comes from the cultural context that we find ourselves in. So my next question would be to TY, and thank you for staying on.
Thank you.
From a cultural perspective,
yes.
What role do you see our culture playing around either creating limiting or expansive opportunities for women?
Well, I can, like she said, I can only speak for myself in certain instances. I know, for instance, I'm a photographer, and I remember when I started making images and my images started getting noticed. T.Y. Bello was a man, and whenever I showed up, people were shocked, and they're like, "Oh, is your guy on his way?" And I'm like, "This is he, she is he, But I believe it's not just culture. I also think it's history. How many women have done this, and how many women have done that? So if no woman has done this, so what gives you the audacity to think that you can? I can give an example. When I got the opportunity in the last administration to document the presidency on a very, very intimate level and to go behind the scenes and actually photograph what happened, I realized that it was important for history. I don't know who Abacha was. I don't know how he smiled. I don't know who got to document him. Yes, we saw him behind the dark sunglasses. We saw him shake a few hands, but we never saw any vulnerable moment. We never saw him in doubt. And I felt like, okay, I need to take on this job well. And I know that I'm surrounded by men, and I know that I'm surrounded by security that are going to try and create boundaries for me to tell me how far I can go based on how far people in history have gone. So for instance, when people in government walk, you don't move close beyond a certain you don't move close beyond a certain level. And I'm like, no, I want to get this shot. I'm shooting wide angle. I need to move closer. So it was always a struggle. But I do realize something, that because I fought hard and because I constantly broke barriers, people who have come after me, I found it a little easier. They haven't had to explain, and they haven't had to show work. They haven't had to stand for 72 hours to let them know, yes, I'm a woman, but I am tough and I'm strong. I will hold my camera, two of them, I'll hold my cameras in my hand for 72 hours and I will not budge because I'm serious about what I'm doing. So sometimes I think it's working extra hard, knowing that it's not just about you and your own personal experience, but realizing that every time you push boundaries, you are creating and you're writing history. You're telling a new story that somebody else can say, hey, but this is how it's done.
Yeah.
You know, you create new, this is how it's done. You know.
Great. And you've been quite successful in transitioning from a singer-songwriter to a photographer.
Oh, now I'm trying to transition back. It's kind of tough now.
So what were some of the, and I think you've alluded to that, but just in a bit more detail, some of the things that you did or your unique selling point around being able to successfully make that transition and actually being dominant in an industry that is highly occupied by men.
Yeah. It's about creating new definitions. I remember when I told my mom and her friends that I wanted to be a photographer in 1999, one of a very close auntie who really cared about me was like, Kilo de bai, why now? Do you understand? Because prior to that, in her mind, a photographer is someone who is struggling and carries a camera and is with bathroom slippers, and, you know, they did not have a picture of what I was aspiring to. Unfortunately, thank goodness, they didn't know that I didn't have a picture either. It's just that I had a very strong conviction that this is something I'm meant to do. I don't know why I'm meant to do this, but I know that I can do this. But I also found out that it's all the same. It's about composition and telling stories. You write a song, you tell a story. You make an image, you tell a story. What I do with my work is to tell people stories. Even when I take a portrait of a woman, I want her to see herself differently. Do you understand? It's so extreme that sometimes I'll photograph someone and I'll meet them 2 years down the line. I can't recognize them because I have, in my head, created this persona, and that is all that I see. I see every woman at her highest and most beautiful and the strongest, and I sell them that story. And when they believe the story, they become that person in front of my lens. And it's exactly the same thing with music. So I find it very easy to go back and forth between the two mediums because it's exactly the same thing. You're trying to inspire people. You're trying to show them this is really who you are. Or even if I'm just reiterating who I am, you know, I'm becoming a mirror for other people. And that's why it's so easy to go between the two art forms for me.
Fantastic.
Thank
That's
you.
great. And I think that's very powerful as well, being able to see, getting people to see the grandest version of themselves,
Yeah.
and believing that and having that come through in the in photography.
Yeah.
Obi, you've been very vocal about the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, which is a very worthwhile cause, and certainly our hearts and prayers go to the girls and their families. And do you feel gender has played a role at all? Do you feel equally supported by men in this campaign?
Actually, a lot of the people who came out on the 30th of April, when we had asked our citizens to come out after many weeks of social media advocacy, and we went to do a physical advocacy by turning up at the Unity Fountain. A lot of the people who came out were men also. But it was mostly women that co-convened, you know. So we had Hadiza Bala Usman, who was, you know, really the young woman that said, social media is good, but it looks like these people are not, you know. So it's important that they see that people are on the street really interested in the in the rescue of the girls. And then Miriam Uwais, Saudatu Mahdi, and I, and then Jibo Ibrahim. So we then began to convene people to come out on that 30th April, and many men came out. And for majority of the men that have connected to the tragedy, it's been because they would always say, I don't want to imagine my daughter in the hand of terrorists or in the hands of terrorists. If we set the standard that it is perfectly okay for the poorer segment of our society to go through tragedies of the kind that the Chibok community has gone through, that the kind that the parents of our Chibok girls have gone through, and we, the elite, can find the moment to sit down and discuss whether it was, should they have done this or should they? Oh, come on. If children that I gave birth to or any of the other elite class gave birth to were abducted, you think the government would have kept quiet for as long as it did? It would never have happened. It's simply that we are now a society where we actually are insulated and isolated from the poorer segment. So if it happens, it's one of the things that happened. We can comfortably just, you know, walk on by. Walk on by. I came out for Chibok girls on the basis of my sense of outrage that those girls were completely being ignored by the system that should have responded to the distress call that they had been abducted.
Yes.
The issue is, where are the Chibok girls? Where are girls who went to school? If you ask me to explain my personal connection to their story, that's easy and simple, and I would do it. Borno State was the key state alongside Yobe that when I was Minister of Education, had the worst parity level in education, girls and boys. So for every 4 young men in school, only 1 girl in school. And we needed to bridge this disparity in education. So Borno State was a profile state for us. In fact, it was a major state of intervention. It was this lovely young woman, Aisha Umar was my task team person for gender education, you know, girl-child education reforms. So Borno State was major. Now, when those girls were abducted, I was angry because I sort of thought, so parents who were convinced in very difficult environment to send their daughters to school, then we didn't safeguard them.
Yeah.
They are gone and they are with Boko Haram. And all we're going to do as a society is say, another one bites the dust.
I think, yeah, totally
I wasn't
agree.
going to.
Yes, I think definitely there's, it goes without saying, the fact that it is a tragedy in our society to have that happen. Because you've been such a powerhouse, you know, standing firm for what you believe in. So it's really speaking to people who go through situations where you're trying to fight for a cause, you're trying to take a stand, especially as either as a man or a woman, but in this context as a woman, and then you're having a lot of external challenges and feedback, being able to really stand firm in that, inspiring people in that situation.
No, I get your point, which is basically to say to people, in my response, you got to set your eyes on the ball. The girls were more important than anything anybody was doing. I mean, one of the things that happened in the course of the advocacy, where, young men were sent to beat us up at the Unity Fountain. And, some of these young men, they would run all the way to try to, hit at me. And something would say to them, we can't hit this woman. And they would run back. They hit a couple of our people. But, they would come all the way again, and they would want to, sort of like wanting to push, and something would just hold them back. And they would run back. I saw that. So whatever it is that you can experience, we experienced in this advocacy. And for me, it was one of the saddest things. But what you've got to say to yourself, taking that inspirational window on this, is, look, what cost can I possibly pay now that can come close to what these girls? I keep wondering that 219 young women interested in education. Can you imagine, with all that they've been through, that we then find these girls and rescue them? These girls would be the greatest symbol for girl-child education. You understand? They will be the greatest symbol.
Absolutely.
All through the ages. Any other parent that would say, my child would not go to school, these children would be like a reflector, saying to them, are you really sure? Just look at me. I went through all of this. I have now gone back and completed my education. See how I am. Are you saying that your daughter cannot be like me? It won't be you and I now needing to plead. It would be those girls making a clear statement.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it would be legacy for the people of Chibok.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as we talk about education for women at all levels, in the rural areas and everywhere. As a nation, we have a responsibility to the girls, and I think we're all united in our, in our intentions and our prayers that the girls do actually come back home safely to their families. What's then the biggest impact or cost of speaking your mind? Not necessarily about this campaign in general.
Yes. A knock on my head when I was younger, You can relate, right? They did it to you also.
I think we can all relate.
Yes. So, but it was helpful that I had parents that encouraged voice. They encouraged voice. They wanted us to take ownership of our conviction. So my dad always used the term courage of conviction a lot in raising us. And so a lot of the times when I think of my opinion, my view on an issue, I am saying, is it an expression of my values? Mm-hmm. If it's an expression of my values, I'm not prepared to negotiate. Because it's okay to negotiate everything, but my values, no. I wouldn't negotiate my values. My voice on issues are a reflection of the values that I hold strong and that I hold dear to. Yeah.
Fantastic. When we look at the context in the country today, we've got a lot of challenges. We have a devaluation of the naira, unraveling of various corrupt practices, etc. What advice do you have for young people in Nigeria today in terms of how they can apply themselves, not giving up on any dreams that they have? You can still be the best that you can be. You can still come out of all of this in triumph. My first thing would be
that the flip side of every crisis situation is an opportunity waiting to be harnessed. And so if there is anything that a young person should be thinking about right now, would be, what are the problems that this particular moment requires people to be solving? What are the problems that go with a time like this? Because if I can identify those problems and I can figure out the solutions to those problems, I actually stand a chance of not just solving problems, but having a living. So if it is basically about people trying to figure out what they can do for a living, that would be a good way to think of it. Because in crisis situation, existing solutions no longer work, right?
Yeah.
Because existing solutions were okay for a different context, So thinking of it that way just sort of makes you an entrepreneur. And the entrepreneurial mindset is the mindset of the problem solver. And so you've got to think of it that way, because then it unburdens you from saying we're all in trouble. You can distinguish yourself. I can identify the various problems of the different segments of society, and this is what I can solve, and these are the opportunities that are created. Then the second thing has to be, if I am in a changing context, then I need to be thinking, am I equipped for this change? Am I equipped to handle it? Because as circumstances change, the skills with which you're going to have to, to deal with the changing context would have to change also. But if you stayed stuck in the person that you've been, in the expectations that you've had, in the possibilities that you can see, then you're stuck. It's a dangerous place to be stuck. Just knowing what you knew yesterday. Yesterday is gone, people. Today is new. And every new day requires new skills, new thoughts, new ideas, new ways, new partnerships, new orientations, new attitudes. And then number 3 would be to actually reach out. It's a threat to be too small in a world that is more and more global. Okay, so you must reach out. I see some of the brilliance of the generation, your generation. I see the brilliance, but I also see a certain amount of self-adulation, and a sense of dysfunctional individualism. So people just love the idea that it's, I am the champion who is doing this thing all by myself. No, today's world is a world of collaborative partnerships.
Yep. T.Y., what's your take
I'd like
on
to
that?
add to that. It's this is the world, the age of social media. And social media means communication, conversations. And I find that there's a deception to think that it's just a conversation and it's not real. So we don't realize that we're actually part of the conversation and that we actually make a difference. I mean, it sounds very blasé, like you make a difference, but it's not just speaking, it's deciding what your posture is concerning the problem that exists, and the fact that you may not be able to prefer a general solution to everything, but you have a solution for something. I have one of my biggest mantras is do for one what you would do for all. And letting people realize that solution that you have that can help your neighbor. Do you understand? The fact that you can share generator with your neighbor to help him save costs. Do you understand? Just that little tiny solution goes a long way in you actually being part of a conversation than tweeting at other people and criticizing them and telling them what to do and how to do. Is within your own parameter, within your own boundaries, what changes can you make? And then starting with that. I think it's a small idea, but I think it'll go very far.
Thank you so much.
But let me have a final word and say to the women that are here and that are listening, the pressure on the younger generation of women professionals is much more than we even coped with. It's a world that is much more fast-paced, and the kind of expectations that are placed on you are more more varied. As a woman, one tool that I use is what I call my 5 realities. My 5 realities are these. Number 1 reality is my reality as a human being. That it is in that reality as a human being that I have been given the talent by the Almighty. That talent is unique to me. It's my authentic personality, and it is the gift that I have that education would have enhanced. And so in that my reality as a unique individual, I can be anything that I choose to be. I can be a photographer. I can be a Google manager. I can be a radio station owner. I can be a lawyer. I can be a doctor. I can be a teacher. I can be anything that I choose to be. And what I need is to find what would enable me be that. And if there be any glass ceiling standing between me and what I can be, I'm just going to walk through that glass. Your second reality, my second reality. My reality as the product of 2 people, a mom and a dad. They gave me the history that is mine. There would not be me if a certain Benjamin and a certain Cecilia did not come together. If I neglect that my reality, I lose my history. I lose everything that is supposed to enable me understand where I have come from. So my reality as a daughter is very important. My reality as a daughter is what enables me to not repeat the mistakes that my mother made or to repeat the mistakes that my dad made. Then my third reality is my reality as a sibling. Even if I didn't have brothers and sisters, I must have had cousins, because this is Africa after all, So that reality enables my socialization. My reality as a sibling means that I am a sister to a brother or to a sister or to cousins. Now, what do they do for me? They teach me how to lead. Because in the early days of my growing up as a sister to brothers and to sister, what happened was that I needed to be able to persuade them that it was right for us to do this or to do that. If I didn't persuade them, I didn't get people who followed me to do any particular thing. I learned persuasion by being a sister. Learned leadership by being able to convince them to follow me. Then your fourth reality is likely to be your reality as a wife. The companion of this wonderful man that you decided of all men that you're going to marry. I mean, that's an incredible reality. It's partnership. Marriage teaches you partnership. It teaches you how to not live for yourself alone, to learn how to live for somebody else, to sacrifice, to get to the point of intimacy that marriage is about. Then your final possible reality is that reality as a mom. The reality as a mom is an entirely different experience. It's this experience where you're preparing the world for the future. That future that you're preparing the world for is going to be defined by what you deposit in the twins. The world is waiting for the twins on the basis of what you do with them today. You're going to unleash either great children of stature on society, or they are going to be terrorists. Which one should you unleash on the world? It's a reality. So being a mom, being able to invest in the children, so important, your reality. Now with all these 5 realities, how do I manage to cope as a woman, is your question to yourself, right? You're going to say, there's not a single of my reality that should be traded off for the other.
Balancing.
Do you know why? Because the capacity to express all your realities are already in you. So because they are in you, what you need is to be able to say to yourself, how do I keep expanding and expanding? And then there are days when one particular reality is going ahead of the other realities. And you say to yourself, I have observed that this reality is suffering. Let us recalibrate a bit. So you're constantly recalibrating, but ensuring that no reality gets forgotten. Don't ever forget being a wife just because you want to be the best radio owner. Don't forget being a great mother just because you want to be T.Y. Bello, the global photographer. Don't forget being a daughter just because you have become a wonderful wife enjoying your husband. There has to be a way that the divine that's giving us all of this inside of us can help us
Hold it
to
all
sort of
together.
hold it all together.
I think that's a very powerful note on which to wrap up. A big thank you to Obi Ezekwesili. Thank you for, you've committed this day to us. You know, you've been on this for, I'm very grateful.
That's why
and I owe you one.
I
I'm
told
very
her at the
grateful.
airport. Let me reveal your secret. I told her at the airport, let me go back. This flight thing, the amount of delay that they say they have is too much. It's going to be so unproductive for me to sit at the airport. So let me go home. And I was hoping that she was going to say, oh, actually, that's not bad. She said, no. Please don't go home. Yeah, I think we should just wait at the airport.
Are you guys not glad I did?
Yes.
So thank you very much. And thank you, T.Y. Bello.
Thank you.
You've also been with us for quite a few hours now, through both sessions. Thank you both for your leadership, for your inspiration, and thank you for spending this time with us.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone that has shared this day with us. We look forward to continuing the conversation around, women really stepping up and standing out and smashing the glass ceiling, if there is one.
Gotta kick it.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.